Year 11, so you should have a copy of the poem Midwinter, and you should also have the handout that I've done to go alongside this video. So you should be able to make all your notes on the handout that you've got, and you'll also need a green pen or a different coloured pen at one point. Okay, so we're going to do unseen poetry today, as you can probably tell. I'm going to pick up the language when I'm actually in the classroom with you. So I just wanted you to see what the exam paper will actually look like. So on this slide here is essentially what you're going to see after half term when you do your mock. It will be on two separate sheets in your exam, and you have 20 minutes to spend on 31, which is the response to a single poem, and then you have 40 minutes-ish to spend on 32, which is your comparison. So I just didn't want you to go in blind, having not seen exactly what that looks like, and you can see it obviously printed in front of you. And they're the two poems that we're going to practice with this week initially. Right, so just a reminder that there is no context for unseen poetry, so you don't need to worry about when it was written and what the writer's intention was. You get to decide different potential intentions based on the poem. So the key skills that you need to be focusing on are writing with an academic register, so making sure you use that formal speculative tone that you use in your other literature essays, being able to embed, which you're really good at, precise and well-chosen quotations to support and enhance your own ideas about the poem, being able to make precise inferences like you do really well in language, demonstrate secure understanding of the entire poem, and it is important that you cover the entire poem, much like in language where you have to cover the entire extract and Shakespeare as well. And then for AO2, it's all about whether you can pick apart the writer's choices. So the language choices, the structural choices, the type of poem they've chosen to written. I will go over those very briefly next time I see you on poetry. And it's all about, like with every other literature essay, can you link it to the emotions created, the thoughts created about the subject or the focus, or the ideas or lessons the writer teaches us about ourselves or the world. And really, I think the easiest text to do band 5 with, the ideas and lessons, is a poem, because nobody sits down to write a poem unless they are really intending to change people's ideas or to teach something that they've experienced. And alongside that, of course, they want to shape our thoughts and our feelings as well. Okay, so how to approach section A. So we're not going to do any comparison work today. We're just looking at the analysis of a single poem, which is worth 15 marks. So when you get into the exam, I would like you to read the poem twice, and you do need to read it very carefully. There could be one word in the poem that changes your entire interpretation. Please don't scan over it and miss it and then, struggle to get into band 3. Okay, make sure you read the poem twice very carefully. When you've read it, highlight very quickly the key quotations that you wish to use. So there's some guidance there on your sheet for what a good quotation looks like. So your first goal is to unpick the writer's explicit meanings. What is the poet trying to literally say on the surface about the thing they're writing about? So anything that helps you to pin down what the poem's about, who's speaking, what the event is, where the setting is, all those things which I'll come to later as a list, that's what you should be looking for initially. Then, of course, you need to be able to analyse some key images and language used, so words that are rich in connotations, things that you can associate with other things, all things that will help you show off your language analysis. And then Band 5 students especially, you should be looking for cross-references, so words you can link from across the poem to either contrast or support each other, and then that means that you'll be able to build arguments in your response. So if you can say the poem is about X, and then you've got 3 pieces of evidence from across the poem to support that, that's obviously a much stronger argument than if you're just using one piece of evidence from the first line of the poem to support your argument. So look for those words that you can link together to help build your case of what you believe the poem is focused on and what the poet wanted us to feel, think and learn. Okay, so just to kind of draw all that together as a conclusion, I'd like you to jot these down, please, as a mind map. So you can pause the video to make sure that you can get this down. You don't need to have all of the bit that isn't in bold down, just those 5 key skills. But I'm going to start with the bit at the bottom. Please do not count in your literature exam. A good literature student does not count anything, okay? Please do not count the number of lines or the number of stanzas. It doesn't matter. Please don't say that it's really interesting that there's, 4 lines in each stanza and then 3 in the last one, or I'm not even going to tell you what not to do because I'm worried that I'll just encourage you to do it. Please don't count anything. It will not lead to any rich analysis at all. And please don't talk about what the poem looks like on the page. Don't make comments like, if you turn the poem on its side, it looks like blah, blah, blah. Just don't go there. All right. You've got to think about the language that's used. This is not a maths exam. So, inferences, speculative tone, a cohesive essay where you're building your own ideas, don't contradict yourself, your analysis of specific words, and your organization, your ability to analyze the order of the poem. So always try to look for the first and last line, because the first and last line of a poem are obviously very purposely constructed. The first line sets the tone, really focuses the reader on what the writer was intending you to focus on. And the last line, obviously, poets are really good at leaving us with this like lingering feeling with the last line. Sometimes it can completely change the poem and redirect us or prompt us to think further about something. So last lines and first lines are really rich to analyse. Of course, if you can't link the first and last line to the writer's meanings, there's no point commenting on them. But if you can, do. And if you can track the poem like you do with an extract and like you do with your language extracts, that's the best thing you could do. Okay, so please pause. If you haven't already, please pause this this slide here and make sure that you've mind mapped the key ideas there. Okay. Right, you have got on your sheet, I've already printed these for you, so, your speculative tone word bank. The one thing I would highlight here is the one interpretation. You wouldn't generally use that too often in your other essays, because I've usually told you or we've discussed a key interpretation in class. But in your unseen poetry, you can explore different interpretations because you have no idea which one it could be. So using that one interpretation, la la la, however, it may also suggest la la la, is a signal to the examiner that you are a band 5 student. Okay. Right. This is the key thing that I wanted to teach you for unseen poetry, because lots of students do find it a bit scary to get into the exam and think, I don't understand this poem. But please remember that that is the equivalent of going into your English language exam, like the one you've just done, that paper 2, with an article, and reading an article for the first time and panicking that you don't understand an article. And I think I've ever heard in my life a student say to me, I can't read this article because I've never read it before. My teacher's not taught me what to say. An article is no different to a poem. An unseen poem is the same as your unseen articles that you do in language. It's just written in a very formulaic, structured way, which actually sometimes can help you to understand the meaning a bit easier than a very waffly article. Okay, having said that, if you get into the exam and you open the paper and you read the poem, you think, oh God, I don't know what this is about, which is very, very possible. This is what I want you to do. Obviously, I don't want you to panic. I don't know why I choose before 1, but there we go. Take a deep breath and a long exhale, and that will magically calm you down. I'm not lying. It does work every time, because obviously if you're panicking, you're not going to be able to read it very carefully. Okay? So if you have opened the poem and you really, really have no idea, the first thing I want you to do, please, is to highlight the words that you're familiar with and you actually understand, because there will definitely be words that you do understand in that poem, and it'll help build your confidence and it will help you to focus on what you can do. Okay, so just look for the words and the lines that you do know and you're familiar with. Jot down what you understand about those words, and it does not matter if it doesn't fit the rest of the poem or if you're not sure about it, just write it down because it will build your confidence. Once you've done that, it's kind of like picking it apart in stages. So once you're focused and zoomed in on the things you can do, you might find that actually then other parts of the poem start to unlock for you, and you can really start to understand maybe the line after a line that you're very confident with, or a line before it might suddenly make sense because of what you've realised the line after it is about. So go back over it then and see if you can understand other parts, and also just look for the part of the poem that you're most confident with. Okay? Even if you write an essay on a part of the poem, that will get you marks, and that is better than writing nothing, and that is the worst thing you can do. Now, the unseen poetry is really rewarding for students who just have a go. And as long as you use a speculative tone, and as long as you're able to draw out quotations, even if you're not really getting any of the meanings correct, you will still get marks for having those literature skills of being able to write a good essay that has quotations, inferences, and word level analysis regardless. Okay, and even if you've only partly understood the poem, you're still going to get good solid marks. So the worst thing you can do is write nothing. I don't think any of you would, but just in case, because I'm not there to see. And I'm just trying to imagine what you might say. Okay. Other tips for this poem analysis then is, don't forget, if you're stuck, it always tells you in the question what the poems are about. So use that as a starting point, because that's at least going to tell you what you should be looking for. Also, I think this is a good tip. Consider reading the other poem, because you know that there's going to be similarities between the two poems and there's going to be differences because you've got to compare them. So actually, if you read the second poem and that makes more sense to you, it might give you a little hint or tip into what you should be looking for in the poem you're struggling with. And then don't forget as well that poems usually contain imagery. So double check if it doesn't make sense. Maybe it's because it's using a metaphor or some kind of symbolism. And if you kind of try and read it again, thinking about that might help you to unlock it as well. Okay, so that's some good tips for what to do if you really not sure what the poem is about. Okay. Regardless then of whether you are a person who sat there going, this poem makes no sense, and if you're a person sat there saying, oh yeah, this is easy, these are the specific questions that I want you to ask for the poems, and it just means that you're getting a good solid foundation of the explicit meaning the writer's going for, and you kind of, it's almost like asking yourself when you read an article, what's the purpose, who's the audience, what's the format. So we're looking for who's the speaker, or the narrator, the persona who's written the poem. Who are they talking to? Sometimes it's clear, sometimes it's not. Why are they talking and when are they talking? So there's a lot of questions there around the speaker, but if you can ask yourself those questions, it will just help to focus you in on the kind of, that you need to know, or you need to have a feel for those things in order to really get the deeper meanings of the poem. If you don't know who's speaking to you in the poem, then obviously you're not going to get the good full grasp of it. Sorry, that was a bit waffly. Topic, what is it about? Is there anything unusual about it? Is this a typical representation of the topic? The setting, again, is it a typical representation of the setting? How does it shape the meaning? What is the event? Is there one? A lot of poems don't have any events. They're just a moment in time, or a description of a feeling. Emotional, is it a physical event? How does it build up? Is there any resolution or change? Look for changes in tenses, look for changes in feelings, in tone. Tone is the last one. And think about atmosphere as well. So is it an optimistic or pessimistic tone? Is it hopeful or another word for pessimistic, lacking in hope, unhopeful about the future? Does it change? And then the tone will have a massive impact on your thoughts and feelings. I bet you didn't realise how much tone was going to be the theme of our last few weeks of lessons. So yeah, look for the tone in the poem and the atmosphere that's created. Right, so what I would like you to do now is, I would like you to read Midwinter by Graham Davies, and I would like you to read it twice, and then I would like you to annotate it specifically for these 5 things. But if you are struggling, please follow the advice I've given you on a couple of slides previously, and just try if you can to just highlight some key quotations, please. Thinking again about what I said about what makes a good effective quotation, which you've got on your sheet. So if you can pause the video for about 10 minutes, please. Do this in silence. Really give yourself that challenge of sitting by yourself like you're going to have to do in your exam, and really think about, right, here's my poem, what can I get out of it in 10 minutes? That's a lot more time than you're going to have in the exam, but obviously this is your first lesson on it, so I wanted you to give you a bit of breathing space. Please do it in silence, and then if whoever's covering you is happy, maybe for the last few minutes you can start to discuss and share what you've got, or if you get stuck you could do that, but please don't spend any more than 10 minutes, please. Okay, so pause now for 10 minutes. Thank you. Okay, so these are some potential answers of what you could have got, but I'm very conscious that this is an unseen poem and there's different ways to interpret it. And if you've come up with other ideas, that doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong. And I know that I'm not there to hear your ideas. So I've put on the slide some potential ways of interpreting these key questions. Can you please add on in green any that you didn't get? And you can pause when I finish speaking on the slide so that you've got time to get them all down. It is quite unclear who is speaking. We don't particularly learn anything about them specifically. We more learn about their feelings towards the season of winter. Now, we can't assume that Graham Davies is the person speaking to us, but if you write the writer or the narrator or the persona, any of those things is fine, really, until you get to A-level, and we'll narrow you down a little bit more. It's clear that he's focusing outwards. He's not focusing, he's not telling us about himself, he's telling us about the season of winter, but obviously his own feelings are directing what he feels about winter. He's speaking to a reader. You know, he says the bitter cold that makes your fingers sting. And he says, you know, anything you say. But the you feels very generic. It could be anyone or no one or everyone. You know, when sometimes you might write in your diary, it makes you feel, but you're not really speaking about a you in particular. You're just speaking about humans in general. So there's a sense of sort of, he's almost just getting his thoughts out. It's not that he's engaging in a conversation. And that might seem like an obvious thing to say, but some poems aren't that. Some poems are actually somebody, a father speaking to their son, or, you know, a man speaking to a snail. Yes, there is a poem about a man speaking to a snail. When is the person speaking? He's speaking in present tense, isn't he? Can you see that he says, no breezes move the branches, no birds sing. There's no... It's almost like a timelessness to it. It's obviously not past tense. He's in winter right now, but there's the sense that this is almost eternal, that it's constantly happening. Obviously, the setting is winter. There's no specific place mentioned, but, and I'm hoping some of you will have realised this, if you look through the poem, it's very rural in feel. It's clear, lots of countryside references, very few urban features. This is not a description of the middle of Liverpool in winter. Yeah, we've got no descriptions of Bald Street being an ice rink that year when it snowed, and I had to shuffle down it because I thought I was going to fall. No references of snow on the top of buildings, or, you know, birds flying over the Mersey of the docks or anything like that. It's very, very pastoral in feel, which basically means like countryside, farmland. You know, you've got your birds, the leaves, branches. It's all it's very natural, isn't it? It's set in nature. I maybe should have added that onto the setting, that it's focused on natural features, no urban ones. Okay, and then topic event, obviously it's looking at winter as a season or an event, but there's the sense that even in the middle of all the emptiness and lifelessness, so the birds aren't singing, that there's dead leaves, the clouds are shrouding the sun away, so there's no light, there's an icy mist from anything you try to say, so there's a sense that you can't change anything because it mists up around you, because it's so cold. But even within all of that, there's hope for spring and that life will return. So the earth in winter trusting for the spring, that all of us together, and not just humans, but animals and nature itself, trusts in the idea that life is cyclical, that it will come back round again, that life will come back, and this won't last forever, which I think is actually really, really beautiful. So there is that sense of hope. And then you could look for deeper meaning in that, and I'll come to that later on in the lesson. In terms of the tone, bleak but hopeful is a concise way to describe it. It does suggest that winter is pretty rubbish to be in, that you feel like everything's stagnant, that you can't have any impact, you can't change anything, that everything is cold and sort of in hibernation. But there's that idea that actually we all know that it will end, and that's what makes us feel better. Spring will always come around again, and new life will come around again, which is my favourite time of year, spring. Everything feels so hopeful. So Hopefully some of those ideas are what you came up with as well, but if not, please don't worry. And if any of you are really worried thinking you completely misinterpreted it, please send me a quick message on Show My Homework, or come see me before next lesson, so I can try and reassure you that, you know, you've probably not gone completely wrong. It's just that you might not have got these exact ideas, which is fine. I have mentioned there to remind myself, remember to only comment on the parts of the poem you do understand. You remember that, you know, you don't need to cover every line, so don't risk losing marks by focusing on a bit you're not sure about. Focus on the bits you do know. Right, do you want to pause this if needed so you can get down any extra notes? Thank you. Right, I'm now going to move on to teach you how to actually structure your essay. All right, but don't worry, we are going to do a bit more work on actually, you know, preparing you to respond to the poems next lesson. So big letters there about keep it speculative. You need to write the entire essay as if you are being very open and you're not entirely sure what the whole thing is about, but you're making suggestions to the examiner about how it's made you feel and what it could possibly be about. So you need to start with an overview of how the writer presents whatever the focus of the poem is. So try to comment on the tone here as well. This example here that you can see, the screenshot, is from our top mark answer from 2017. So in the poem Midwinter, Davies explores the negative aspects of winter with the use of a pessimistic tone. The reader gets the impression that Davies dislikes the season, so may have past grievances about it. So can you see there, you've got the speculative tone of may have past grievances, that making that inference about, well, if someone feels this pessimistic about winter, maybe something's happened in the past to make them feel this way. Pin down the tone, and I focus on the reader straight away. The reader gets the impression. An impression is also a bit of an open speculative word, isn't it? Okay, the key thing is, though, she just pins down, and it was definitely a she because I used to teach this student, she just pins down that it's about the negative aspects of winter, and that's exactly what the poem is about, isn't it? So she shows straight away that she gets it, she understands it. If you're going for band, this is the same as what I say to you about your Shakespeare extract. If you're going for band 3 and 4, then track the poem to structure your essay. So start at the top in the opening line and then move down like you do your Shakespeare extracts. First line, quotation, inferences, word love analysis. Next key quotation that you've highlighted, inference, word love analysis, and keep going. Okay? However, if you're going for band 5, I still want you to do that, but before you start, I would like you to pick out the most significant quotation first. Again, like you do in your Shakespeare extracts, the most significant moment of this extract is, I want you to do that with the poem. The most significant quotation, the one that pins down this poem's central message or tone. So, for example, firstly, the most obvious feature of this poem is the repetition of no breezes move the branches, no birds sing 4 times. Oh dear, she has done some counting, so I apologise. I suppose it's interesting if you're counting how many times something's repeated. But the main point here is that obviously this is her opening argument. She said firstly, and again, she said obvious feature rather than significant feature, but that's fine. And that is something that is very significant, that line is repeated 4 times across the poem is something that's worth drawing out. And obviously Davies has very consciously done that. He's obviously feeling that line is worth repeating. He's pinning down some key meaning by the very fact that he has repeated it in itself, and there's another line that's repeated as well. So that's an example of how you can pin down at the beginning of your essay the most significant quotation. Okay. Right. I've already said you must keep it speculative. And we've already gone through what the key vocab for that is. Please never use means. Don't use it in any literature essay. We have talked about this before, but especially in your unseen, because you don't know what anything means. None of us know what anything means in unseen. Okay. We're being speculative. We're making suggestions. Make sure you use may, perhaps, or might. Okay. So for example, perhaps Davies is using, that's all it takes. Just shove the word perhaps at the beginning of your sentence and you're sorted. Okay. Right. Word level analysis then is really, really important. So this is how Hannah went on to develop that argument she made about the birds singing 4 times. So the repetition of the word no combined with the dynamic verb sing, dynamic verb is just an action verb, suggests that winter is controlling, and this has a certain power over nature itself, as it seems to be overpowering nature's animals, the birds. The repeated focus on the birds, and then she goes on to analyse the birds. So straight away, perhaps too soon, perhaps she could have looked at the overall inference of that quotation first, but straight away she's thinking about the fact that that word no in conjunction with the word sing suggests that, and she's made a very insightful point there that actually suggests how controlling winter is, that even birds who are which are natural and can't be conquered by winter per se, because obviously they don't have to hibernate, or a lot of them don't hibernate or anything like that. Some of them fly south, as we know. Nature itself is winter itself is overpowering nature's animals, and she's making that interpretation by zooming into those keywords no and sing. Okay, you know how to analyze language, you know how to do word level analysis, but I just wanted to show you that example. Okay, so your band 5 essentials then. Obviously, a poem usually has some kind of deeper meaning, and your job, if you want to be getting band 5, is to try and evaluate those potential deeper meanings, because you don't know exactly what they're going to be, but you can speculate. So it's all about weighing up different interpretations. Please don't do this straight away. So there's been cases in the past with the exam board where students have gone in and tried to make this, a really detailed, thorough, very advanced, shall we say, interpretation of a poem by claiming, it's all a metaphor for God, or it's all a metaphor for blah blah, and actually it wasn't really anything to do with that, and they didn't pin down the actual literal meanings of the poem, and as a result they've done very poorly. So I'm saying this with a big sort of warning sign above it. You have to analyse the obvious meaning first, pin that down, show the examiner that you get the poem, and then you can consider potential symbolism and deeper interpretations, and try to weigh them up as well, like, literally weigh up different evidence against each other. Say, these 3 quotations suggest this, however these 3 quotations suggest this, and explain why. So do ask yourself, could it all be a metaphor for something else? So for example, this is just a random 2 lines. The winds blow constantly round and round, uplifting me from the pavement as I walk to school. I feel like uplifting is actually a bit of a positive word there, but never mind. So on the surface, these 2 lines are a description about the wind. It's a windy day. They're walking to school, and the wind is blowing around them, and they feel like they're being lifted up from the pavement. But of course, as a deeper symbol, that could be about a lack of control. That the wind is forcing them out of themselves. They're not able to control themselves. And also that constantly maybe feels like they're constantly feeling pressure and that they can't get control of themselves. And that idea of feeling at the mercy of nature, which we sometimes try to forget, don't we, in the middle of our cities. But we absolutely are. So that's an example of what 2 lines that are about wind could be symbolic of. All right. So have a think then, always, what could be the deeper significance or meanings. And in this case, for Midwinter, have a think what you might think the deeper significance of Midwinter is. So can you pause the poem here? Pause the video here and have a discussion, please, just for a couple of minutes, what you think the deeper significance could be. And then once you've finished having your discussion, unpause the video and I'll go through what the candidate I've shown you said. Okay, so if you pause now. Okay, so hopefully you've had a chance to have a good discussion. This candidate said, perhaps Davies is using the season of winter as a metaphor for the emotion of grief, and that losing a loved one causes a person to cling onto the memories of happier days and trusting for better days, and a time for grief to pass, just as the earth in winter trusting in the spring. Davies cleverly structures his poem so that this is the final line and suggests that when a person is grieving, the feeling seems unending. Okay, so what's really good about this exploration of a potential deeper meaning is that she's embedded quotations throughout that help to kind of justify her case. It's not my initial interpretation personally. I don't read the poem and think, oh, this is grief. But she's actually really convinced me because she's come up with some really nicely embedded quotations, and she's linked it to that final line as well. And that idea that when you are grieving, it feels like it's never going to end, but you have to kind of trust that it does. I don't know if she's expressed that bit exactly clearly, but the examiners ticked it because you can see the ticks there. So they've accepted her interpretation. And that's kind of what I want you to realise from this. Can you jot this down, please? That as long as you've embedded quotations and as long as you've made your interpretation fit with the poem, then they're going to reward you for it. They're going to reward you for having that deeper thought. Okay? Also make a note, please, that that appreciation word, cleverly, that's a really nice appreciation word to show that, you know, as a writer of someone who's analysing this poem, you can really appreciate the ideas and what the writers come up with. So successfully, effectively, cleverly, that will help give you a band 5 register as well. So can you make a note of that? So just to conclude, that's 2 things you need to write down. Firstly, that you need to embed key quotations and build a case for your deeper argument. And secondly, use appreciation words like cleverly, successfully, effectively. Okay. Right. Just to finish off then, you've got these printed, so I won't go into them, but there are sort of typical symbolic tropes that come up a lot in literature, and I've written them there, and they are things that you can look out for all the time. Okay, some of them are you might recognise from poems that you did in the anthology. I don't know if you got, I think you did afternoons. There's a lot to do with seasons there, isn't there? The rose of love. I always think of Beauty and the Beast with roses. Doves and peace and birds and freedom. So these are all, well, apart from obviously if a bird's in a cage, then it would lack of freedom. Look out for those because obviously they will guide you a little bit. And just always think to yourself, well, what could be being suggested here? What could this represent? What else? What big event, emotion, or human experience could also be being represented by what's in this poem? Okay, right. So, independent next steps, and this you can start this if you've got any lesson time left. I'm going to show you that, you know, the candidate you've been seeing today, the extracts from her work. I'm going to show you her entire response next lesson, and I'll show you a comparison response as well. So what I thought would be useful is, if you've got time, and this is not a homework, this is just suggestion. If you've got time, it would be good for you to actually just spend 20 minutes writing a response to this poem so that when you do see her full response, you'll be able to have a sort of sense of comparison. You'll be able to sort of give yourself some feedback on where you're up to and what kind of level you're writing at for your first response to an unseen poem. I've also got a band 3 one that I'll show you as well, so you can kind of see, you know, are you closer to the great band 3 or the band 5? Are you somewhere in the middle? If you don't have time, then that's fine. Obviously, I'm still going to give you the example next lesson. I just thought you'd get more out of it. So if you've got time in this lesson now, please start or finish it if you've got a whole 20 minutes left, and see how you get on. Okay, I hope everything's okay. Please come and see me or send me a message if anything's gone wrong or if you need me to go over anything specific, because obviously we've only got 3 lessons left between now and the mocks. And sorry, I was a bit repetitive at times. It is quite late at night and I'm a bit tired, but I hope that it's been a useful video, and I'm looking forward to seeing you on Wednesday. Okay, take care everyone. Bye bye.